Let's get to the Heisman watch here because we've been watching this, and I hope you've been watching us every week here on Betting Across America because Wes is always talking about value. That's what we try to talk and try to give you value. I don't know that we saw much value in Bryce Young and or Matt Corral because if you remember those numbers, they were like maybe plus 165, plus 135. Now they've both backed up just a tad to plus 200. Not still, to me, the value that we're looking for necessarily. But, again, because of the Bijan Robinsons, because of some other names, because we get this feel that there's nobody that's grabbing this award and running away with it, I wonder now. I mean, look at Corral's numbers. Mm-hmm. And I know that people are going to go back to the Alabama game, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Signature moment didn't happen, really. But his numbers weren't terrible. No picks. Look at the yards and touchdowns are ridiculous. Okay. Is there any value for either one of these guys at plus 200?
I wouldn't say value. That doesn't mean they can't win the award. But look, for Ole Miss, I think Matt Corral's kind of in that position where it's like, we probably got to run the table and get into like a New Year's Six bowl.
Yeah.
Probably playoff contention is out of the question, but you still play Tennessee, you still play LSU, you still play Auburn, Liberty, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. So there are still some quality opponents amongst that list. So he still has a chance, and that's why you haven't seen it drift up, plus the fact there's a lot of tickets on him, and you don't probably want even more exposure for all the folks that did bet him at the low 20-1 range. So that's why you're not seeing him drift, and plus the fact that you seem to get new names on the list every week. Look, there's one running back in action right now, Kenneth Walker III out of Michigan State. Now all the way down to 14-1. He was kind of the under-the-radar guy. Now he's firmly on the radar. Bijan Robinson, we mentioned, has already scored a touchdown. You have Desmond Ridder for an undefeated Cincinnati at 20-1. So you've got some guys down there lurking. I think these are the right two favorites. It looks like, Young and Corral in terms of the invite to New York for the Heisman Club in downtown New York City. Young and Corral are going to be invited. CJ Stroud from Ohio State at 8-1 right now is going to be invited. And then there might be one or two other ones, maybe one of these quarterbacks down the radar or a couple of these running backs. But yeah, I think at this point it is tough to find value with 2-1 with Bryce Young and Matt Corral. And look, Bryce Young's still up there. They have lost already. Now, if they lose a second or a third game, that's going to probably drift up because we've seen with these Heisman Awards, it oftentimes goes to the most high-profile player on the most high-profile team, except last year we had the outlier with Devontae Smith, the receiver, who is as high as 200-1. He ends up winning the Heisman and not Mac Jones. That's what will concern me, and we'll probably get to this in more detail later in the program with C.J. Stroud, because he's got all of these weapons at Ohio State, and I feel like Mac Jones almost got punished.
He did
last year because he has Devontae Smith and John Mechie and Jalen Waddle and all these NFL players, Najee Harris. Well, look, Stroud has the same thing with Henderson, the running back, with Olave, with Garrett Wilson at receiver. I mean, they got four high five stars all over the place. So it's like, well, he's got all the weapons in the world. So maybe that's what's kind of helping Matt Corral is that the talent perception is seen as a little bit downward, obviously, from the Alabama and the Ohio State level.
It is surprising to me, again, because maybe they counted off for all that talent for Mac Jones. And I think some people look back and go, wait, if you look at Mac Jones' numbers a year ago, this guy didn't win the Heisman Trophy? Like, it's pretty preposterous when you look back for people that say it's just a quarterback award. That's why I think you see these two guys at the top of the list as the co-favorites to win the Heisman Trophy this year. Do you think that the voters then, is there some sort of, I hope not. I hope there's no backlash that says, oh, Mac Jones should have won it last year. We went out of the box and gave it to the wide receiver who had great numbers. So this year we have to give it back to a quarterback because you just mentioned Bijan Robinson, and I look up and you mentioned he already has a touchdown today for Texas. It just feels like because nobody's running away and you're trying to find value people, I would say hold off on the quarterbacks. Like I would not today buy in on Bryce Young or Matt Corral because to your point about Corral, he's got good games in the SEC schedule to your point, but now it becomes about the team. Can the team elevate the individual, even if the individual has great numbers? Because we know the team for Alabama is always going to be high profile. So I wonder if Texas now with 2 losses? Can Texas still in Bijan Robinson, because of those 2 losses, he shouldn't be nullified from winning this award because his team's lost twice. He was dynamic in the Red River Shootout.
And that's the issue here is that you're going to have to put up really great numbers if you're on like a 3-loss team or something like that. Texas, of course, with 2, but you're still seeing 20-1. That's not out of it by any stretch.
No.
But the guy down the board that doesn't necessarily put up the huge numbers, but is still on an undefeated team, number 3 in the country, by the way, that is Cincinnati. Desmond Ridder still at 20-1, and you really haven't seen any movement for Desmond Ridder. He's just kind of hanging out there. So it's like maybe that would be a guy that would be worth at least a stab, but they're not going to get that luxury. You talk about having 1 or 2 losses. If Cincinnati has a loss, that immediately, I think, dismisses Desmond Ritter's campaign, although very solid numbers, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1,304 yards. Certainly not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but Cincinnati's going to have to make that playoff, you would think, and kind of stick where they are and continue to run the table. But if they do, I think Desmond Ridder is absolutely going to have value.
I think the biggest shock, we've mentioned players, you look at the top 6 teams in the country, right? We mentioned a player in the 3rd-ranked team in the country, Cincinnati. We mentioned somebody, obviously, in the 5th-ranked team in Alabama and 6th in Ohio State. We didn't mention anybody from Georgia, the number 1 team in the country. Didn't mention anybody from Iowa, the number 2 team in the country. And nobody from Oklahoma, the number 4 team in the country. I mean, that is an outlier in and of itself, that 3 of the top 4 teams don't have a Heisman Trophy candidate. I mean, that's absurd. Have you ever heard of something like that?
I have not, because a lot of these prices have absolutely drifted off with injuries at Georgia to JT Daniels, their quarterback, and obviously Spencer Rattler. How long is he going to keep that job in Norman? That begs the question.
When we come back, Pete Futek from collegefootballnews.com is going to join us, and we'll pick his brain on all things college football. Come on back. It's Betting Across America right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.